Okay, so I want to raise a very important issue about religious totalitarianism and free speech. Very, 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 very seldom will you see those two things put amicably in the same sentence, because naturally religious totalitarianism and free speech cannot be comfortable bedfellows. So the Team GB star Lewis Smith, he's a medal-winning gymnast for Great Britain, was recently filmed drunkenly getting down on his knees and pretending to pray as a Muslim, saying Allah Akbar. Okay, so as I understand it, I've seen the video. He was drunk and doing what a lot of young men do when they're drunk: be foolish, be just, mess around. To be very clear about this, I've watched the video. He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't go out and vandalize a mosque. He certainly didn't advocate violence against Muslims. What he done was a slightly childish imitation of Islamic terrorists. Um, no, I think if people were offended by this, they're offended because they know deep down that there are Islamist fanatics out there, some of them who do attend mosques. That's a real issue here. Anyway, predictably, in the spineless, politically correct society that we are, instead of defending his freedom of expression, the Gymnastic Association have reprimanded him. In fact, I heard today that they have now banned him from the team. A spineless, cowardly move, pandering to political correctness. And this is after he apologised. So he apologised. He even visited a mosque for re-education. To because he had to be publicly shamed. When these things happen, the person who is involved always has to be publicly shamed. They need to be re-educated in a certain brand of tolerance. But how often do we see Islamists being put on the same pedestal and being shamed into tolerating secular society? We don't. Firstly, because they're arrogant, and secondly, because they they are actually against the ideology of free expression. Okay, we've all seen the placards: "Free speech can go to hell." So we're talking here about a clash of values, and unfortunately, those of us who believe in secularism and freedom of speech and liberty, what we're seeing is utter spinelessness. Now, I don't know what Lewis Smith's intentions were in going to the mosque afterwards. I don't know if he genuinely felt guilty because of the sort of critique that it involved, or if he just felt pressure to do it. But either way, I think it was wrong. And here's why. And I definitely think it's wrong to block him from the Gymnastic Association. I think Lewis Smith's in his mid-20s, so in theory, he probably could do one more Olympics. If he's banned from the Gymnastic Association, presumably that means that would impact his chance to compete in Tokyo. I don't know. Hopefully, this will be a temporary measure, and hopefully, the public outcry will pressure the Gymnastic Association not to be so gutless. Because frankly, that's what they're doing. They're caving in political correctness because they don't want their association kind of connected with someone who has been involved in a video like this. Now, to be clear, I'm not condoning what he done. It was a bit childish and it was a bit unbecoming of an Olympian. But there's far, far, far more important issue here, and that is the threat from religious totalitarianism and those who actually advocate that religion is above mockery, because that's what this comes down to. The problem is if you take a position like mine, the regressive left, and I definitely intend to get around to making a video about this because it's, I think, an important issue, associate that with bigotry. They associate it with racism. They associate it with hatred and bigotry of Muslims. Now, if Lewis Smith had, say, vandalised a mosque, I'd be saying I've no sympathy with him. If he had advocated violence against Muslims, if he had slandered all Muslims as being crazy terrorists, then I'd have no sympathy with him. But what he clearly done in a drunken state was mawkishly impersonate a jihadist. He wasn't attacking Muslims in general. Now, anyone who is paying attention knows that Islamic fascism is a reality in this world. We see it all the time. Um, and what we've seen here is just spinelessness on the part of the authorities who are basically feeding this young man to the wolves. And it's just unfortunate. It isn't the first time and it won't be the last time. But here's the thing. Those who say that there is a difference between criticizing a religion and mocking a religion fail to acknowledge certain points. Firstly, whilst it is true many people hold religion very dear to them, and it is very important to them and it guides their life, and therefore naturally they're going to be offended when people criticize or especially mock it. It is also true that there are people who hold socialism dear to them, and conservatism dear to them, and libertarianism dear to them, and feminism dear to them, etc., etc., etc. Those are also belief systems. They may not be religion, but they're belief systems in the same way that people hold dearly. And to some people, to certain political ideologues, their politics is more or less their religion. They hold it very dearly. They believe in its values. I don't see much difference. So if you're saying, oh, but you cannot mock Islam because it's held dear by millions of people, then you may as well say, oh, you cannot mock socialism because it's held dear by millions of people. You cannot mock conservatism because it's held dear by millions of people. But no one would humour the idea of saying that because they know full well that would equate to totalitarianism. It's what dictators do. So the false equivalencies here are utter nonsense. People need to understand ideology and religion is separate from people. And the fact that people choose to be offended, the fact that they hold that dear, is really beside the point. It really is. Bear in mind, we live in a world where, in Islamic jurisdictions and in many Islamic countries, it does vary in terms of the level. But in many Islamic countries, the very notion of blasphemy will get you stoned to death. In numerous Islamic countries, if a woman has been a victim of rape, she will be the one who is blamed and punished. I read today about a young woman in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, who was caned. Her crime? Standing too close to her boyfriend. You know, this wasn't like she was engaging in some sort of public sex act. She was standing too close to him. She was caned. And that's actually moderate compared to some parts of the world. Banda Aceh, incidentally, is the one Islamist part of Indonesia. Although Indonesia's a Muslim majority country, it's relatively moderate, or at least most of it is. I don't think you would see that in Jakarta. Banda Aceh is the ugly example within Indonesia of where this happens. So, you know, to Muslims who are watching this and say, oh, you're just picking on Islam, the reason I'm mentioning Islam so much is because whilst you do get fundamentalist Christians and Jews and Hindus who won't have a sense of humour and would also respond very aggressively, it simply is not on the same scale. The fact of the matter is Christianity is mocked all the time. You see it in Family Guy, you see it in all sorts of sketches. Life of Brian, going back years. For the most part, you do not get the same level of outrage. Yes, Christians may get annoyed at it and they may not like it. But this idea of Islam being above scrutiny, there is another important point: satire. I do agree that sometimes some of the mockery of Islam is just crude and it isn't particularly intelligent. So, for example, when you see cartoons of, I don't know, a naked Prophet Muhammad doing sex acts and so on, I don't think that's particularly intelligent. I've not much time for that type of satire because I think it's wasted. Not because it offends people, but because I think it's a wasted opportunity. It's not clever. What's a lot more clever is the satire that really speaks to the truth and it's biting. Satire has been used for centuries in Western countries to make political statements. It can be a very powerful tool. You know, a good, clever political cartoon satire can speak 1,000 words. So when religions are mocked, more often than not, that is satire. Sometimes it's crude. And I'm not saying I always like it. The point of this video is not to say, oh, that's a wonderful type of humor and I personally find it hilarious. That isn't the issue here. The issue is freedom of expression. If you don't agree, I'll give an example. Okay. Charlie Hebdo. I have looked into some of the stuff that Charlie Hebdo has come out with since the attacks at the start of last year. I don't particularly like Charlie Hebdo. I think I made a video about this. I think a lot of the stuff that Charlie Hebdo comes out with is trash, to be quite honest, and it is quite insensitive. And like they had a cartoon mocking a downed Russian jet, and they were basically laughing at the victims. So I think they're like schoolyard bullies. But I still think that you have to be very, very careful when you talk about banning things. And it's troubling that Lewis Smith has been banned, at least temporarily, from the Gymnastics Association. Shame on them. Shame on them. I have a good mind to contact a Facebook page and let them know what I think. Some might say that's trolling. I think they need to know that, that they've basically held up the notion that he's some sort of hateful bigot. He's not. It's just a young man who got drunk and just done something a bit foolish. He did not advocate violence against anyone. And the hypocrisy, the fake outrage from, or maybe it's real outrage, whatever, from a lot of Muslims who will not hold the same standards when there are Christians in Muslim countries and others, Islamic minorities included, Ahmadis, Sufis, and atheists, who are basically persecuted in a way that is utterly appalling. And this sort of moral equivalency, when I hear Muslims claim that Muslims are persecuted in the West, it's delusional. There may be individual incidents of hate crime, but you simply cannot make a comparison between pretty much any Western country and sort of things that go on in a country like Sudan, Somalia, or Saudi Arabia. There's no moral equivalency because whilst in secular countries you would have individual incidents, say for example you might get far right thugs who attack a Muslim at prayer or something, and I will always condemn that. But there is no moral equivalency because they are individual incidents as opposed to an institutional situation. And when those incidents happen, the people responsible are caught and punished, or at least the police take it very seriously. We have legislation against hate crime, and rightly so. But we must not go down a line whereby offending religion becomes a hate crime. And I really do have concerns, and it isn't just about this, it's about other things as well, which I'll cover in my video about regressive leftism. But we are going down a line where it's basically thought crime. And frankly, that is Orwellian. That is much more at home in a totalitarian state than any democracy. And people can be offended if they want. They can say, I think that person is full of shit. I strongly disagree with what they're saying. But the notion that it should be banned, I've actually seen Islamist videos, trying to stir up hatred against non-believers because of what Lewis Smith said. In the end of the day, Islamists will find any excuse for this. So even if all critics of Islamism are all, like, never criticize it, these people are fanatics. They hate our way of life and they will find any reason to attack us. So the notion that if if we kind of force this sort of fake tolerance, oh, then the Islamists will leave us alone. That's a lot of crap, and it shows an incredible naivety as to what sort of mentality we're dealing with here. They're bullies, and the only way to stand up to bullies is with a fist, and I mean that metaphorically. So it's just bullshit. What I would say to Muslims who say, "Well, I don't support Islamism, but I don't support what Lewis Smith done," all I would say is, I'm not saying you have to like what he's done, but at least acknowledge that mocking of religion is not in the same category as stirring up hatred against religious adherents. It just isn't. It just isn't. Because when Monty Python in the 70s made sketch shows which were pretty much mocking Christianity, they were not saying we want people to go out and hate Christians and beat up Christians and all the rest of it. So people need to understand the difference. They need to understand the difference between mocking a religion, whether it's right or wrong. It is different from hating religious adherents. That difference is critical. And I will always condemn people who go online and say all Muslims are the same, that stir up hatred against Muslims. I will always condemn that because that is a totally different ballgame. So thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts.